There we go. Does the sound working now? I tried to use my AirPod Pros. Looks like that did not work at all. Can you guys still hear me in my space? Dang it. That's really annoying, actually. I hope that the space is still working. If you can hear me in my Twitter space, I would love if you could give me a little thumbs up or like a high five or something like that. I think someone said the sound doesn't work. Great, thank you so much, Corey. And yeah, once I finish going through the ChatGPT API, let me I'll just request it as a speaker and I'll let you on. All right, so we have multiple versions of GPT, like OpenAI. I get those mixed up. I say those incorrectly all the time. So OpenAI has been working on these for a long time. And I would say that it's safe to say that now that they've established a method for training a successful generative pretext transformer, GPT-3, and they've shown its use case through ChatGPT, they are now able to really turn it into, like, they can iterate on that insanely fast. So I actually think that GPT-4 is really just the beginning. GPT-4 seems to be the first launch that OpenAI has created or has done in tandem with multiple companies. I know Duolingo has a Duolingo Max that is using GPT-4, and I know that Khan Academy is also using GPT-4. So I feel like this is just them getting started, truly. Like GPT-4 is them getting started. ChatGPT was just, let's just whip this out there and see how it does. And literally, I'm pretty sure it broke their servers hundreds of times. And they have learned so much from that. So GPT-4 is just the beginning, and now that they have this, now that they've built it and they have this approach to training, they can start to move very fast. And that is so fetching. Like, that is both terrifying to me and also incredibly dope. There are so many jobs that are going to be created from GPT-4 and on, and just these different AIs and on, that just couldn't happen before. Our speed of progression is going to be insane. But back to this idea that GPT, or just ChatGPT, is an insanely intelligent 5-year-old, and that computers will do precisely what we want them to do, or what we tell them to do. So this generative pretext transformer, they've created an API that lets us interact with it. And it looks like, they've added new things for us, so that we have guides for text completion, code completion, chat completion. That's cool. I really like that. And image generation. Chat completion was not there previously, so I think they added that recently. That's awesome. But the basics of the AI is that, where's the actual API? I found it one time. I didn't. Obviously, I'm not prepared. You're just... Okay. We are looking for the actual API, not this information on them. I want to look at the actual endpoint that we query and send information to get the response back from OpenAI. There we go, completions endpoint. Gorgeous. All right, this is exactly what I was going for. Okay, so the OpenAI has, it looks like they've added additional endpoints for like chat and different things like that. But when you're completing text, the original API endpoint that they had available to us before they added GPT-3, and look, they've updated the docs quite a bit since, I think it's been maybe 3 weeks since I looked at this, maybe a month. So they are cruising full force. But basically you're just telling, you would tell OpenAI with its specific model, you would give it a prompt and you would tell it to complete it. That's all you would do. You'd say, here's some text. Create your most intelligent response. Complete. I love the word that they use is very indicative. They say complete this text with your most intelligent response, basically. And to me, it's like I found that to be very, very interesting. Because from the computer standpoint, it's like, what does complete look like? And so when you're telling the API, when you're telling the GPT model to complete text, it's like that's what it's doing. It's taking the text that you've given it, a prompt, a question, a statement, a story, and you're telling it to complete it with its most intelligent response it can possibly create. And it's not deterministic, so you can give it different code at different times and it'll generate different answers at different times. That's what that means. Non-deterministic means depending, like the input does not necessarily equate to the exact same output. So we have this completion API endpoint where we feed in information and we just get back the AI's most intelligent response, or I should say completion, of the provided text. Hence, insanely intelligent 5-year-old, from my standpoint. And you can probably say that it's a lot more intelligent with GPT-4, and you'd probably say that that's very true. Jake on Chain. Dennis stands as a technological titan, its scalability ready to be unleashed like a cosmic explosion, its security annihilating, fortified by a shield of unencrypted energy, and its chain web protocol like a digital engine propelling us towards a revolutionary new era of blockchain technology. See, it can do stuff really cool, and but it needs context and it needs clarity on what you want from it, or you're not going to get the appropriate answer, because it's just completing the text that you give. It's taking all of the input that you provide as text. I mean, you're just saying, it's like, here's your prompt. That's what when ChatGPT is doing stuff, it's like, this is what's passed in. They probably have some additional things that they did, like we can take a look at the chat API in a bit, but when they when you pass this in, it's like it's just completing it to the best of its ability. Like that's it. That's its goal. That's its prerogative. That's what you tell it to do. And so you are feeding it a prompt and it gives you an answer. And the quality of the answer is dependent on the quality of your prompt. Literally, that's what they call it, a prompt. So all these people who, like, I read today, there was a guy who was like, I got trash responses from ChatGPT for the longest time. And being completely honest, I was like, well, duh. I mean, trash in, trash out. That's true in anywhere you go. And so there are different mental models that you can use to approach discussing or talking with ChatGPT. And a lot of people seem to be making a business or some kind of equivalent out of, I've got this amazing prompt that lets me generate all kinds of things and generate ideas upon ideas, or help me look at my writing from different perspectives, or help me know what to do in these different situations and all the different stuff. But at the foundation of it, you get in what you ask. And this has been true for me programming my Cadena multi-chain IDO throughout this week. It's like having ChatGPT write code for you is like, he can do it really, really fast. And he can make a lot of really good decisions wholly dependent on my ability to provide all of the information he needs to make the appropriate decisions. If he doesn't have that information, he does not give me what I need. So from a programmatic perspective, the best prompts, I think, are a combination of like an operational specification, which is basically what is the list of actions that you can perform within this object or ecosystem. And that just looks like an interface. And an interface from a programming perspective just lists off, it literally is an operational specification with some documentation. If you have some docs for each of those functions, like, dude, and you give that to ChatGPT and you tell him how to specifically implement it, he can do an insanely good job. And so I will kind of finish with this. I firmly believe that in 2 years' time, maybe less, maybe a little bit more, but on average around 2 years, we will no longer be writing code. We will be telling ChatGPT or AIs of some kind what to build, and they will be building it for us. What this means is that those who understand the principles at play and are able to describe them correctly and appropriately to the AI so that the AI can build what was actually wanted and desired. Effectively, those who are articulate and patient enough to create these prompts for the AI that will allow it to build precisely what they need, those are the people who will move the fastest, run the farthest, and really leverage these AIs to their fullest capacity. Like, it's going to be insane. The amount of things built and generated through AI from people who just are incredibly articulate about what they want, like, it's going to be crazy. And again, I'm terrified and excited. The AI is going to flip the world on its head. I really believe it will, because you no longer need to have an amazing understanding of code in order to write code. You just need to understand the principles. And I can write it in any language I want. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't. And there's so much power in that. Like, it's gonna be insane. It's gonna be crazy. So I'm excited for it, and I'm preparing myself for that eventuality where I'm not gonna be writing code anymore, even though for literally my whole life, like the past 16 years of my life, code has been what I have done. But it can't be that anymore because an AI can write it so much faster than I can, which means I need to get very, very good at describing what I want and need to an AI so that he can build it for me. But that's everything from me. We got Corey, Corey, who would like to hop in and speak with us. So welcome aboard. How you doing today, man? It's been a great week. I've felt so dangerous this week. I've gotten so much stuff done, and it's just been a blast. Like, lots of things I've learned.
How's my audio coming through?
I can hear you just fine.
Should I be calling you Sterling?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
That's my name in the space. I'm fully doxxed at this point. If anyone wants to know who I am, like, you know.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in using ChatGPT to code. Seen it coming for many years now, and it's finally very interesting to see it come to fruition. Super interested in learning more about how you're using it in the Cadena space, and also what are you seeing its drawbacks. And then I'm really interested in, from my perspective, GPT-4 was the first time I actually thought it was useful. GPT 3.5 or anything not as good as GPT-4 just feels like a search engine.
Okay, so breaking that down into, I guess, three parts. One is how am I using AI on Cadena. Two, what are its drawbacks? And three, what do I see as far as uh, like I guess in the future? Where is it going?
Yeah.
Is that right?
How are you seeing the technology improve in a very short period of time?
Okay.
Over the next, I'm only talking about the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. First and foremost, using it on Cadena, like, I'm using it right now to build my multi-chain IDO. I missed one day this week, but I tried to stream every day. And after this space, I'm actually gonna start up another YouTube stream and work for an hour on the multi-chain IDO. And I've been using ChatGPT to build my widgets, my components, and to also build my services. So interacting with wallets, for example, and connecting with wallets, retrieving my public keys or accounts from wallets, and uh, signing my transactions, all that good stuff. So he's been very. I mean, I'm using him. I'm forcing myself to get ChatGPT to write the majority of my code. So that's how I'm using it in the Cadena space right now. I haven't used him to write a whole bunch of smart contracts. Being honest, I haven't had the need to write a whole lot of smart contracts recently. And so I think I have like one more smart contract that I need to write, but my goal is still to wrap up all of my Cadena work by the end of March so that I can hop over to Radix and start learning Radix. Yeah, nothing has changed as far as like my opinion on the scalability of Cadena in terms of like the base layer can scale, but the dApps on top of it can't really scale super well. And I'm just seeing that more and more as I build a multi-chain IDO. The complexity that I will need to deal with trying to make it all work is it's mind bending. There's a lot to think about, and so I enjoy hard problems, but I do not enjoy unnecessary complexity, and I feel like Cadena introduces a lot of that. So sorry, I digress. So I haven't used it to build packed smart contracts in quite a bit. I've been using it mostly to build UIs in Flutter.
To get back onto the topic of GPT, I mean, previously you said it's difficult. Are you finding that using GPT is helping you?
That's a good question. I believe yes. I think that the answer to that question is a really hard yes, actually, because uh, in order to in order to have ChatGPT make the things that I actually need, I have to be very articulate and clear about what I need him to make, which means I need to have a very clear understanding of what needs to be built before I even approach ChatGPT. Otherwise, you won't build the right thing, which means that I am forced consistently to clarify my own understanding of what it is that I'm building before I even try to build it. And honestly, that is the best way to work. It is always the best way to work. You can, I mean, I said this in a tweet a while back, but your speed of progression is not dependent. Like, let's see. People always say it takes a long time to write good software, and I hate that statement. I believe that is 100% and wholly untrue. It takes knowledge and clarity to build good software. If you know exactly what it is you're trying to build and how to build it, and you have a perfect understanding of that thing, you can build it insanely fast. And if you can feed that information and you have that information available and you can feed it into an AI like ChatGPT or just GPT in general, he can build it for you. And so there's no reason, like the statement that it takes a long time to build software is mostly saying we have a lot to learn still, and that learning takes a lot of time. But building the actual thing doesn't take a lot of time anymore. I should say anymore. We have so many tools and resources that make it way easy for us to build. So I would say yes. Working with ChatGPT has forced me to be consistently very clear in what I wish to build and describe it literally out loud, both to myself and to him, in order to get the proper responses. So I would say that currently the drawback of GPT is that, I mean, I don't know if you can ever get rid of this, but um, you have to consistently maintain that clarity in your conversations with him. Or he'll start to derail, he won't give you the appropriate answers, he'll give you too much information or information you don't really need or care about. When you're asking him to generate code for you, for example, he'll commonly rewrite entire files that you didn't need to care about. And so you just have to tell him, like, don't rewrite the entire thing you wrote above, just rewrite this portion of it, like this one function. So that's something that I've run into quite a bit actually with trying to get GPT to generate code for me, is that he rewrites everything when he doesn't need to. Like there's a one-line code change that might have taken place, but GPT generates 250 lines of code, and you're like, well, you didn't really need to do that. But thank you. So I suppose that's the one drawback that I'm thinking of, or like that comes to mind right now.
It sounds like there's both a learning curve to using the models at this time, but it is making you more productive as far as faster to product. It sounds like in the last week you feel like you've gotten so much more done than you might have otherwise, and it's also engaging you because it's causing you to think about at a higher level all of the complexities of the different code that you're writing, and then it's showing you very clearly where the gaps are for doing something like a multi-chain IDO. And so can you coalesce maybe like the top 2 or 3 reasons why Kadena is difficult for something like the difficulties that you've had so far in your development for the multi-chain IDO?
Yeah, so I think I wrote this down in a Figma document that I was building. Let me just refer back to that because I think it's got the most information, or just all of this information already coalesced for us.
Mm-hmm. So as you're going for that, what I'm thinking is, if it's possible, because Kadena is the only chain that I've seen that is actually, we've seen the issues of bridging between 2 different crypto ecosystems, like just from what we've seen with Ethereum and all of the issues we've had with bridges across the board. Whereas in a lot of ways, Kadena is just many different chains and its bridges built in. So it's, at least in theory, possible to build something that is multi-chain, but just the complexities of doing so, it to me seemed very daunting, and it doesn't seem like other chains are really thinking about that. And if there is a need to scale in a decentralized way, it seems like these problems will need to be solved to make it easier, to make it seamless, so you don't even need to think about them.
Yeah, honestly, like 100%.
Mm-hmm.
These things must be, well, like they must be taken into account. Otherwise, the experience for developers is just it's gonna suck. I think you have 2 amazing examples outside of Kadena that really show off a multi-chain structure and how it can work incredibly well. Like Cosmos and Polkadot are those 2. Personally, I feel like Pact is one of the coolest things that Kadena has built, 100% hands down. The 100% on-chain smart contracts, or I should say bridges, 100% on-chain bridges, where like you can transfer assets across chains, and or just run multi-chain function calls is really, really, really cool. Um, but the idea of trying to host a DApp on multiple chains, like across multiple shards, is a brutal, like an absolutely brutal thing to try and do. And there's a reason that not many people have done it, even in other sharded ecosystems, like Cosmos and Polkadot. So, like, Kadena has a lot of work to get to the point where you can work with these in a cross-chain environment, and across DApps, because the future is interconnected and related decentralized applications. So the complexity of the smart contracts is only going to increase. And you hit a brick wall in Kadena the moment you try to interact across chains between different smart contracts. Like right now, it's just a brutally difficult task. I think let's say that I want to swap from CADX with something on KD swap, for example, and they exist on two different chains. So for me to be able to implement that, I have to deploy a an interface on chains 1 and 2. So that's one smart contract. So I have to create that smart contract. Then I have to deploy a smart contract that actually implements that interface that will interact on chain 1 with CADX and on chain 2 with, actually, I think it's swapped actually. Chain 1 is KD swap and on chain 2 it's with CADX. And then I have to deploy a third smart contract that actually does the cross-chain swapping, because packed smart contracts have to be in order for them to interact cross-chain, they must be exactly the same. They have to have the same hash, which means the text of the smart contract must be exactly the same across chains, or the transaction will fail. It'll tell you I can't do that. There isn't a smart contract on the target chain with this function available, because there's no matching hash. You'll get an error. And so just to do a cross-chain transaction between KD swap and CADX, you're deploying 3 contracts twice and setting up a front end that will actually interact with those 2 smart contracts that will do the cross-chain transaction. And the amount of time it'll take to execute all those different transactions. You also need to take into account the layer 2 that you'll have to set up to listen for transactions that are occurring and continue them on the target chain when that needs to happen. So that's something I'm going to have to do when I set up this multi-chain IDO. I guess I'm listing off just kind of the things that you're going to experience, or the roadblocks of building a multi-chain application on Kadena right now. But that's one example of trying to build a multi-chain cross-application DApp, and it already sounds like a nightmare.
Let me ask you, do you think it would be possible, because it's essentially the same thing across multiple chains, do you think it'd be possible to create a function which deploys the smart contracts across all the chains at once?
Oh yeah, that's the easy part, dude. Kadena Code, the tool that I have, can already do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that part is not hard. Yeah, that part's not hard at all.
Because you're saying that you have to write 3 different functions, then you use your code that you're describing to deploy them across all the chains that you're going to use it on.
You have to write 3 different smart contracts in order to create a cross-chain swap from CADX to KD swap.
Got it.
And so I'd have to deploy those 3 smart contracts on chain 1 and chain 2. That's the easy part.
It's the writing the 3 different smart contracts is the complicated part. Those smart contracts have to be knowledgeable enough about the different chains.
Yeah, so writing the smart contracts is going to be a hard part. The layer 2, like setting up a layer 2 that's on AWS or Azure or hosted yourself, that listens to the blockchain for transactions that are meant to go cross-chain, because I have to complete them. If tons of people have just they've lost their money, quote unquote, lost their money because they tried to transfer from chain 1 to chain 2 and it didn't finish, right? The
Mhm.
wallet didn't finish the transaction. And so you have to go into that cross-chain finisher tool, paste in your request key, and then hit finish. And no one is going to want to do that. Nobody. And so in order to make it a good user experience, you have to set up some kind of tool that will listen for those transactions and complete them automatically for your users. And so you need to put together that tool. You need to update and have the UI actually show all of the transactions like executing so that the user knows what's going on, because those transactions are going to take quite a while to execute. Like this is just a one cross-chain transaction, and at minimum it's going to take a minute to complete, because the first transaction has to execute on block 1, like on chain 1. The second transaction must be continued on chain 2, and the minimum amount of time that'll take is, 30 seconds on chain 1 for one block to complete, 30 seconds on chain 2. And there's probably going to be some lag time in the middle there, so let's say an average of one block gets skipped before it gets continued. It's going to take a minute 30 to actually execute the swap. And then you have to take into account potential slippage on the target chain that you may or may not care about. Like you just have lots of things that you need to take into account because of the time necessary to execute these transactions. The layer 2 that you have to set up that will complete these transactions, that if that goes down, or if you walk away, or if that gets too expensive to actually upkeep, like your entire DApp fails. Like it literally crashes and burns because no one is there to complete those transactions. So it's not a fully trustless environment unless you set up a decentralized layer 2 listening for these transactions and finishing them. It's gonna get brutally difficult. I'm certain that they're good. Like it's possible. I won't say that it is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it. I promise you, you can do it. It's just gonna suck.
Everything sounds. Yes, right. And so it sounds to me like, especially the having to finish them, like the ghost. That's a little concerning, right? Because it shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't, for users or developers to consider the chain successful. Like you shouldn't need an L2 to come in and listen. That's an area that needs to be improved, or a library needs to be written that doesn't require that. So it just happens. And so I guess the next question I have is, have you had a conversation about this with the core team?
We brought up cross-chain transactions. I don't know if I've actually talked to them specifically about cross-chain finishing.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a massive issue that you're going to run into as far as automated cross-chain finishing, because each of those transactions costs money.
Mm-hmm.
And so someone has to pay for that. And that in and of itself is going to create a barrier to let's see, how do I say this? The finishing of cross-chain transactions is going to be reliant on gas stations. And if the gas station is out of funds, it won't work. But automated cross-chain finishing.
Yeah, well,
there's a lot of I don't know. That's like
there has to be a way for the end user who's actually putting the request in to pay for it.
Yes, and and that's reliant on the DApp builder being responsible enough to build it for them, so they can press that button to finish it themselves and sign that next transaction.
Yeah.
As opposed to whatever layer 2 or potentially automated service they have that goes into that.
Or the automated service requests a transfer to the gas station so that the gas station can run it.
Yeah, the automated service would have to have a reference to the gas station.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it can't automatically complete it because it wouldn't know who's paying for gas. So
Yeah.
whatever automated service you have would need a reference to a gas station of some kind that can just execute that transaction. It can finish that
Mm-hmm.
transaction. Uh,
Because when again, let me bring up another topic. So in the recent campfire between the CEO and the chief developer of Pact, the topic of using cross-chain transactions and the requirement there. I think CEO of Cadena basically said that just like parallel processing occurred for computing, there's a very similar type of development that's going to have to happen for parallel processing for chains. And I think that the only crypto that is working on parallel processing for chains, like we're talking about, you mentioned how Cosmos or other sharded chains like Polkadot have, they just basically spin up their own chain to run specific use cases, whereas Ethereum's going full in on L2s, which are going to be more centralized, and they're going to be reliant on all these things. But the only people who are actually thinking about cross-chain transactions, running things in a parallelized fashion, is Cadena. But the tooling and how you do these things, all of that would need to get built out to be successful.
Well, first off, I disagree that Cadena is the only chain that's tackling full parallelization.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree with that statement wholeheartedly. And Sui and Radix are two blockchains. They're not even blockchains anymore. Are two distributed ledgers that prove that statement wrong.
Okay.
So
You said Sui?
Sui, SUI, and Radix DLT. They're approaching parallelization from a programmatic perspective. They are approaching it in a much more intelligent manner than Cadena is,
Mm-hmm.
because they've designed their system to recognize collisions between transactions, and if there is no collision between a transaction, like aka, say an example is like I'm sending money to you, Corey, and let's say that Ryan is sending money to Jake, like those two transactions don't collide in any way. The state that's updated from those two transactions doesn't collide. And so we can push those two transactions through in parallel. And we're able to intelligently do that because we know that they don't collide. And honestly, that's how graphics cards work. Like, they have hundreds of thousands of cores, and they are able to execute lots of mathematical operations on data that is fragmented appropriately, and they know that the data doesn't collide, and they run multiple passes to ensure that the data doesn't collide. And Cadena just simply can't do that right now. Its structure doesn't facilitate. Well, from the graphics card perspective, you have different caches of information that allow the graphics card to query information from any thread. And it'd be awesome if I could query information on chain 2 from chain 1, but I can't. Which would be like your equivalent of an L1 cache. So I think that's something they could build for sure, but that's something they'll need to get closer to the graphics card idea. This analogy that they keep putting out, which is a good analogy, but Cadena still is not close enough to the graphics card or doesn't have the functionality of a graphics card, just at its base layer. So.
To be clear, they put out the multi-core CPU. That's the one they're using.
Oh, okay, multi-core CPU. Same problem, same idea. Mm-hmm. Multi-core CPU, the idea is it's like we need to interact and execute logic on disparate pieces of information, on separate pieces of information. And the more intelligently we can separate information, the faster we can run our transaction, the faster we can run our logic. Because if I know that variable A is not going to be written to by anything on thread 1, then but it's just going to be read from on thread 1. It's like, cool, that's really awesome. That means that thread 2 can write to variable a as much as it wants. And so you can, I mean, there's a lot of power in that, and right now Cadena isn't set up in that way. Where they have a hard set of threads, and each thread has its own cache of information and can't read information or write information across chains, which is an inherent drawback and isn't related. Like, from my own programmatic perspective, understanding of a computer, the Cadena chains is unrelated to a multi-core processor because of its inability to handle information and data across those chains effectively. Like, there isn't a singular store of information that all of the threads can access and read from, and that's a brutal fact of Cadena right now.
Got it.
I sincerely hope that made sense. Like,
from my perspective, as a non-technical user, I was able to interpret most of it, although I would say that my understanding is not complete. That said, I'm at my time. I want to say thank you. I think this conversation was really good. Very interested in learning more about your progress on the multi-chain IDO. Maybe as you're working through some of these things, really interested in just kind of seeing if you're able to get to a point where you can have a multi-chain IDO. I think that would be really good. Really excited to hear that. And then also, down the line, hearing more about Radix or what other adventures you have going on.
yeah, of course. I mean, I'll be streaming. I have a signed. I don't know if what I'm allowed to say actually. Maybe not. I don't know. Cadena asked me to build a multi-chain IDO. I offered, and they asked me to build it, and so I'm going to build it. And one of the things they asked me to do was stream my entire experience. So if you subscribe on YouTube, like, I'll be streaming. I'll try to stream about an hour every day, building the multi-chain IDO until it's done. And my goal is to finish before the end of March. So it will be an adventure. It will definitely be a challenge for me to build this, and I will honor that struggle.
Look forward to seeing the progress.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for hopping on, Corey. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for asking hard questions, and I hope my answers were sufficient. But have a great day, guys. Have a wonderful Friday. I will hop into building a multi-chain IDO now.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh.